1943. The Second World War. For the last 2 years, Japan expanded the borders of its empire by thousands of kilometers. But now the Allies are gradually beginning to recapture their occupied territories back. One of the land that was stolen during the 1942 were the Aleutian Islands. The Aleutian Islands are a chain of 14 large volcanic islands and 55 smaller islands, most of which were belonging to the United States. But on the 6th of June 1942, they were captured by Japanese troops. They were not taken for their important geographical location or as a naval basis for the naval invasion in North America, but rather to gain prestige of standing on American soil and also to divert American forces away from the main Japanese attack at Midway Atoll. Without any presence of the Allied forces on the islands, Japanese were able to succeed a quick invasion, and US forces realized the occupation had occurred only 4 days after. From 12th to 25th of May 1943 on the Trident Conference in Washington, it was agreed and approved by President Roosevelt and Mr. Churchill that until Japanese were driven out of Aleutian Islands, the United States would have to keep large air and ground forces to that area, and therefore the Japanese must be expelled. After the capture of Attu Island on May 30, where 15,000 American soldiers and about 3,000 Japanese lost approximately the same number of people, 2,872 Japanese were killed or committed suicide, and 2,363 Americans, 549 of which were killed, and 1,814 were sick or died from disease, the situation on the Aleutian Islands changed drastically. With Attu now under US Army control, the Joint Chiefs directed their attention to Kiska. American intelligence estimated Japanese troop threat on Kiska at approximately 10,000, and aerial reconnaissance thoroughly documented a labyrinth of hardened tunnels and bunkers throughout the high ground. With Attu still fresh in his mind, Kinkaid was determined to allocate sufficient resources for the greater challenge of Kiska. Command of the attack force was vested in Rear Admiral Francis Rockwell, an amphibious operations specialist who had served as principal planner for the Attu invasion. Major General Charles Corlett was to command the landing force, an assemblage that increased to over 34,000, with 5,300 strong 13th Royal Canadian Infantry Brigade, and in addition, 3 battleships, 2 cruisers and 19 destroyers had been assembled. During the months of July, 11th Air Force dropped 424 tons of ordnance to Kiska, while an offshore screen of US Navy cruisers and destroyers lobbed an additional 330 tons of shell onto the island. At the same time, air reconnaissance operations were collecting intelligence on Kiska's occupiers at every opportunity allowed by the notorious Aleutian Fog. As the assault preparations extended into August, the combined landing force began to assemble on Adak Island, 300 kilometers east of Kiska. On July 30, Kinkaid requested and received final approval from Nimitz to execute Operation Cottage. The morning of August 15 was unusually calm and clear in the western Aleutians, but the brief respite from fog and strong winds did not insulate the assault force from adversity. An inaccurate tidal forecast caused several tank landing ships to run aground the submerged web of volcanic rocks near the Kiska beachhead. The stationary vessels triggered a traffic jam as countless landing craft backed up and bobbed unproductively on the coast. The landing was unopposed as predicted, but to the infantry veterans who witnessed the massacre on Attu, the lack of contact with enemy forces simply meant that the Japanese were calmly waiting in prepared positions on high ground. As the landing craft slowly made its way towards the shore, a dense fog began to settle over the island, bringing with it a cold, steady rain. There was no shelter for the exposed landing force. The icy blanket of fog soon reduced visibility to near zero. As night fell, disoriented troops scratched shallow foxholes in the rocky tundra in which to await daylight and some semblance of order. Sleep was impossible. Both US and Canadian forces mistook each other after a Canadian soldier shot a US Lions believing they were Japanese, and a sporadic friendly fire incident occurred which had left 28 Americans and 4 Canadians dead, with 50 wounded on either side. Progress was also hampered by mines, timed bombs, accidental ammunition detonations, vehicle accidents and booby traps. A stray Japanese mine also caused the USS Abner Reed to lose a large chunk of its stern. The blast killed 71 and wounded 47. Sporadic firing could be heard in all directions, and the eerie glow of tracer bullets tearing through fog only added to the confusion. Voices trying to organize and coordinate were muffled and swept away by the wind. Daylight eased the tension, but the fog, rain and cold wind remained. As the infantry began their climb into the high ground, artillery fire roared out of the mist behind them. Support fire from warships continued to whistle overhead and explode in the distance. Rumors of casualties, firefights, and elusive Japanese snipers circulated with abandon. By mid-afternoon, advanced elements of infantry began to reach the lower echelons of Japanese fortifications. Now, new reports of abandoned bunkers and caches of destroyed weapons seemed to contradict the earlier rumors. As more deserted tunnels and dugouts were explored, the embarrassing truth became evident. The combined invasion force had seized an uninhabited island.